Okay. Oh, okay. Yeah, it's fair now.
It's okay?
Yeah.
Okay. So in this first part, I'd like to ask you some questions about yourself. First of all, I'd like to talk about the topic of work and study. Do you work or are you a
Okay.
student?
I'm a student currently. I'm in grade 12 and I'm ready to apply for college.
What are you going to study?
I would like to major in math and physically probably because I'm a big fan of these areas.
Now I'd like to talk to you about the topic of meeting places. Where's your favorite place to meet with friends?
Well, personally, I would like to meet them in a cafe. It is tranquil and serene to meet there, and I can express my feelings to them.
Do you think some places are more suitable for meeting than others?
Well, I guess it depends on the interests of different people. For me, it is basically the most tranquil places is the best, but for others, maybe they have different opinions.
Um, are there any differences between your favorite meeting places now and from your childhood?
Well, I guess probably now I would like to meet, as mentioned before, it's a cafe. It's out of school. But when I was a child, I think the most probably meeting places is at school because that is a place that we can get in touch with each other for my buddy and me.
Why are some meeting places better than other meeting places?
Well, I think whether that meeting places is most uh, suitable for people to meet is better than the places that are noisier. I think that kind of places is not suitable for people to meet.
Now I'm going to talk to you about the topic of advertisements. Are you interested in watching television advertisements or internet advertisements?
Well, probably none of them, but if you really wanted me to choose, probably the latter one, because it is formed based on my interests. But these kind of pre-roll and mid-roll advertisements in YouTube videos are quite annoying. And the television ones is much more annoying than this one, really.
What kinds of advertisements do you dislike?
Well, I think those kind of advertisement that are unbeneficial for my development, or it cannot raise my interest for buying these products. In other words, I think these kind of products is meaningless and it is not attractive to me.
Do you share advertisements with other people?
For some circumstances, yes, if the advertisement is beneficial for me or it just um, uh, raise my interest to buy it, I will surely share it to other people. But it is too vague and unreal. I will not share it, definitely.
Do you want to work in advertising in the future?
Well, for me personally, not really. Because I mentioned before, I am more into the math sphere. About advertising, I just don't raise interest for it. Many people around me, they work into the advertising sphere, and they told me that sometimes they are telling people the stuff, it is really unreal. So I won't want it to um, like to deceive other people. So I will just get into that sphere.
Now I'm going to give you a topic, and I'd like you to talk about it for 1 to 2 minutes. Before you talk, you'll have some time to think about what you're going to say. You can make some notes before you talk. The topic I'd like you to talk about is describe an item of clothing that someone gave you. All right. Remember, you have 1 to 2 minutes to talk, so don't worry if I stop you. Can you start speaking now, please?
Okay, the item I wanted to tell you is a dancing dress. It was given from Helen 5 years before. She was currently And lately, my best friends in a Latin dance camp in order to perform better our dancing movements at that camp. We got in touch with each other at that camp, and we have so many insights about life and also dancing in common. So we became friends as soon as possible at that time, and she just gets know me so well that we talk and we lived together for about 10 days at that time. But one day she was going to leave that dancing places because there's something happens in her home. So she had to do that traces. And she was very disappointed, but she just gave me her dancing dresses for me. I think it gave me for two reasons. As I mentioned before, she was going to leave the dancing places, so she had no reason but to give it to me. And the second reason I think is it is very meaningful for her, and it is also that part for me because it is really beneficial and meaningful for her because she used to wear these dresses to win a lot of championship in a contest before, and she wanted to pass this luck for me in my future championship. So although I feel really pity for her choices, but I still is very thankful and appreciate this chance to wear her dancing dresses. And I'm looking forward to achieve better places and gold for another championship in Latin.
Do you still talk with her?
Not really, because that is like 5 years before. We don't have like IG Instagrams, and we don't have the connection with each other since that time.
Now I'd like to talk with you a little bit more generally about the topic of clothing. Is it common in your country for people to give clothing to each other as a gift?
Well, I think not really. In most of the cases, people send gifts, like the cups, the mugs, and some memorable things to others, but not clothing. Sometimes the receiver of the gift is not acquainted with the people that send the gift, so they don't know each other the the sizes of the clothes they are in currently in, so they prefer to send other items. But for the people that are really get to know each other, I think clothes is a good choices
Why is that?
because they just got in touch with each other so well that they know their sizes for the clothing and they know their taste in the clothing. So it will give the receiver a surprise if they bought the items exactly exactly is the items that they want.
Why do you think people have to dress formally when they go to school and work?
Well, I think there are many reasons why this is the case. I think first, schools and working places are the formal occasions for people to go to. So they have to dress formally in order to fit into that situations and that environment. Because like school and workplace is time for them to do something formal. But if they don't wear the formal dresses, sometimes the leader or also the teachers will forbidden them from doing that.
What about some companies today allow people to dress more informally? Why is that?
I think that company may take into considerations of the or how the people feel at work, whether they are cozy or not. Where people dress uh, just cozier, I think that doesn't mean that they can just dress their um, that is not typically suitable for the workplace. But like the t-shirts go to work, it is decent and also kind of informal for them to dress in workplace.
Do you think the different types of clothing worn by people from different cultures is culturally important?
Sometimes it is a case. I think in the ancient times where there are more separations between different cultures, they tend to wear different clothing that represent their culture, like the Muslim and also the jurist. But I think nowadays, where people are more inclined to have interactions between different cultures, it is not really that important, and it cannot be seen as a separations. Because sometimes people are tend to just wear the clothes from different cultures just for fun or out of other reasons.
What about in China? Do you think that the clothes are important for different like minority cultures in China?
Well, that is really important. We can tell the difference by the closings in the minorities places, especially in Yunnan province and also the northern areas like Inner Mongolia. Yeah, we can tell their closest to know that exactly what minority they are. But recently, I think the although the clothes of them are still has some representation of the culture, but I think it is made more cozy and suitable for them to wear every day.
So, for example,
For example, when I went to the Inner Mongolia like 2 years before, they typically wear the formal dresses that represent the Inner Mongolia cultures on like visible and meaningful occasions. But in everyday life, because I just danced there in a parade, because I can witness a lot of them wearing the clothes that are made of cotton but without a lot of decorations as before.
do you think it's important that more fashion companies start to use environmentally safer or more eco-friendly materials and products?
Yeah, I think it is really important for companies to do that because we humans are living in one unique and universal nation that is the earth. If we don't raise our hands to do something that is beneficial for its development, the earth will be damaged by the people's wrongdoings every day. So I think it is a good way for them to utilize that materials like eco-friendly ones to help eliminate and diminishing that the waste we can just produce to the earth. And also I think it is really eye-catching to use that comment as their as you're just selling their items.
How do you think consumers can encourage companies to do this more?
I think there are various ways for the customers to do. For one thing, I think they can just raise their voice on the internet by just posting a lot of posts on Instagrams or also Facebook. If these kind of people, the number of these people is various and also is numerous, I think the government will have the chances to witness these voices from the local. I think for another thing, they can just write some letters for the government if the cases is super urgent.
Is that effective? Does the government read those letters?
What? What? Could you
Is that
just
effective?
repeat
Will the
that?
government read those letters?
Well, I think on most occasions it will be seen by the workers and the government, but not taking into consideration if it is not that much efficient. But I think the government should just set a section in order to specifically treat with these problems.
Thank you very much. That is the end of the speaking test. So let me share my screen and we'll take a look. So yeah, good job with everything. Um, let's go over it. So there's 4 things that you get marked on IELTS. Your fluency, your vocabulary, grammar, pronunciation, and that gives you an overall score. So for you, like your fluency is really good. So this basically means like how fast do you talk, and you talk fast enough. How clear, how logical are your answers? Your answers are logical, they make sense, they're not confusing. How much do you say or How much do you repeat yourself? Which you don't do that too much. How much do you self-correct? Again, you don't do that too much, so that's all okay. So you can definitely get a 7 for that one. There's sometimes where you maybe hesitate a little bit too much with like the uhs and the ums a little bit. That's probably the biggest thing. If you can, yeah, the uhs and the ums are probably the biggest thing that probably is hurting you a little bit there. So just be careful about reducing some of those uhs and ums, but otherwise it's like really clear, good answers. You could also maybe talk a little longer in part 1. Some of your answers, you don't always have to give a long answer, but sometimes the answers are like a little bit short. You can give some long answers, some short ones in part 1. For your vocabulary, that's really strong. Definitely can get a 7 for that. But it's like especially, so it's like the best in part 2 and part 3. And I think part of that is because maybe part 1's like a little bit too general. So yeah, some of the vocab you use, it's like okay, but you kind of use some similar words, you know, like keep using tranquil. And then it's kind of just like a little bit too basic. So it's better if you can give, you know, a little bit more of like an example, right? So if you had something like, are there differences between your meeting places now and your childhood? And you could give an answer that's like a little bit more specific, you know, like when I was a kid, I'd often meet at a park just around the corner from where I lived, and even like the specific name of the park, you know, it could be like Mulberry Park, you know, like where, because it had tons of swings and a sand pit to play around in, and a small swimming pool. Yeah. Nowadays, I don't have the time or energy to size at the park. I'd rather just head off to a nearby cafe, chill out, maybe bring along my books and get in some studying while we're hanging out. So if you give like a more specific example, it doesn't always have to be this long, but if you give a more specific example, you use better vocab, right? Like the park just around the corner from where I live, swings, sand pit, play around in is a phrasal verb, small swimming pool, don't have the time or energy to exercise. I'd rather just head off. Head off is it just means go, but it's a really good phrasal verb, so it's really natural. Nearby cafe to chill. You know, again, you can make it the phrasal verb to chill out. Maybe bring along, again, a good phrasal verb. Get in some studying while we're hanging out. Get in. So you can get in some exercise, get in some studying. If you can use those phrasal verbs, especially. So like phrasal verbs are really, really high level, natural vocabulary, like say a 9 level vocabulary. Phrases like play around in, head off to, chill out, get in, hanging out, bring along. And when you give a more specific example, you use more specific vocab. And that gives you like a better opportunity to show off. So it's kind of like a better way to show off. You do want to be careful, right? There's something like the difference we talked about before between practicing and like doing the test. You don't want to talk about a topic where you don't feel confident. Like if you think you don't know how to talk about a part well, like you don't know the vocab for that, then maybe it's better to not talk about it. Just give a short answer. But if you feel in your head that you're like, I know how to talk about parks, you know, like I know some good vocab for parks, I could talk about this, then you can use that. You can kind of show off with that. And you can also make it up, right? Like this isn't a real answer. I just kind of made this up, but I used a park because I think a park is like an easy thing to talk about. So it doesn't have to be totally
Okay.
true. It can be like kind of true. You don't want to just like lie about stuff, I think, because that makes it harder for you to think of it. But if you kind of like make it up a little bit, it's not exactly a lie, but you're making it up a little bit just so you can use some strong vocab, then that's okay. So like try to use topics where you can show off your specific vocabulary. It's very similar to what we talked about with the writing, right? Like giving specific examples, kind of like trying to use specific examples for specific vocabulary. And there might be some common areas you can talk about. So like school is obviously going to be a good one for you because there's lots of different areas you can talk about at school. You can talk about the cafeteria, the gym, the parks outside. Like there's lots of words you'll know about what you study, like about your studies, maybe about family. COVID is often a good one because there's lots of good vocab about lockdowns and restrictions, and it comes up for lots of different topics. Maybe friends as well. So there's probably a few areas that you can use a lot of really strong vocabulary, and you should just like try to focus on those and try to show off a little bit more in part one. Because then in part two, when you have more time to talk and it's like more specific, then you use much like better, like vocabulary, insights in common, perform, best friend, yeah, got to know me well. Yeah, just then like the vocab is much stronger in part two, and also in part three where it's like a little bit more specific. Just in part one, I think your part one's okay, it's not bad, but it's kind of like a missed opportunity. Right? So part one is a missed opportunity. Because the questions are easier, that means you can do even more to show off your range of vocabulary, especially like phrasal verbs, like natural expressions, specific answers. And don't try to do it for every single question. It might be like some questions you have
Okay.
a shorter answer. Yeah, it's like, where's your favorite place? Oh, I really like meeting cafes. It's really calm and chilled out, so we can hang out there. Maybe a short answer. But then the next one, you might say, do you think some places are more suitable? Then you might give a different answer. Well, it really depends, especially depending on how old you are. If you're my age, then you might like to go to a cafe. If you're a kid, you might go to the park or someone else's house, wherever your parents bring you. If you're an older person, I think sometimes they are more likely to meet at a cafe as well, at the cinema, go to their house, or maybe just hang around after work. So then you might give a longer answer sometimes, if you think you can.
Okay.
But if you think it's like, if you think the answer is kind of like a little bit hard or something, and you're going to be saying a lot of uhs and ums, then maybe just like keep it short. But then if you get a question where you're like, oh, this one's easy for me
Okay.
to talk about, I can give a long answer, then give a longer answer. Take that opportunity. So you kind of have to judge for yourself, decide for yourself. Do you think you can give a good long answer here? Or maybe just kind of keep it short and wait for the next one to give a longer answer. It's not like every answer has to be the same length. So I think you can do that in part one, and that'll help with your vocab, your fluency, like all scores. Your grammar is fine. I mean, there's some like small mistakes and a lot of sentences. The big thing that probably, like when you took it before, you said you got like a 6.5, right? So like all you need is one score to drop. So like if everything else is like a 7 and then one drops to a 6, then it's like a 6.5. But I mean, actually it could be a 7 as well because the grammar is okay. The problem here is there's like some like simple mistakes, especially with past simple. So it comes up in your part one, but especially in your part two. So part two is almost always in the past. It's usually like an experience or a story. So when planning for part two, don't just write down some good vocab words. Also maybe like write down your past simple. If it is in the past, write down your past simple verbs because you know the past simple. It's not hard grammar, you know it, but you just kind of forget to use it. So write down your past simple verbs and kind of like, you might like write them down twice, like I took. And then you might just underline them when you write them down, like underline them really hard. And that's just like to remind you when you talk to use them because it's grammar, you're just kind of forgetting to use it. You can like whisper it to
Yeah.
yourself, underline it, write it down a couple times. So I would say when you're planning, it's important to focus on grammar. Maybe a little bit of vocab, but focus on your grammar for part 2 to try to get that past simple, especially. That's one that's going to come up a lot. And if you make 1 or 2 mistakes, okay. But if you start making 3, 4, 5, 6 mistakes with past simple, then you won't be able to get up to like a 7 for your grammar score. Pronunciation's
Oh,
mostly good. There are
got
some.
this.
Yep. You have a question?
Mm,
For pronunciation, there's some words a little bit unclear. Sometimes online, that can be part of it. There were a couple of times the internet was a little out, so it might be online as well. But there's some words a little unclear. But you have like good stress and intonation. You sound more natural than most students. But there's still some words, which we'll go over in a second. Any questions about that part?
nope. But I have a questions outside of this. When I just witness a lot of answers, the students' performance on this speaking test ranging from 6.5 to 8, I can't really tell the difference. Especially for the 7 and 8.5 for sure. I think I can just witness the differences between these two answers.
So yeah, I mean, it depends. Is it on like you watch the ones on YouTube?
Yeah, I watch on YouTube.
Yeah, so they should be pretty reliable. I mean, a lot of times for the differences between those big band scores, so like basically when your pronunciation is like understandable, that's like a 6. And then like around 7, that's when it starts to sound a little more natural. So the difference between a 7 and an 8 for pronunciation is basically how natural it sounds. And that comes down to your chunking and your intonation and your word stress. So for example, an example of that would be like in English, we don't say groups of people. In English, we say groups of people. So we say it like that, and we stress the P part and the group part. Right? So we say groups of. This is called chunking. When the words come together, some things are strong and some things are weak. Or a good example of that would be words like or and, for, to. Yeah, those are the main ones. So we don't say, for example, we wouldn't say like coffee or tea. We'd say coffee or tea, coffee or tea. They come together. That's called chunking. It's not coffee or tea. We say coffee or tea, coffee or tea. So the or sound just becomes like kind of like an sound always in English. This is called a weak sound. And then the and sound always becomes like an N sound, right? Coffee and tea, coffee and tea, coffee and tea, not coffee and tea, coffee and tea, coffee and tea. And the for sound always becomes a fur sound. I went for coffee and tea with some friends. I went for. And it's like it comes become like a went for. I went for. That's called chunking, and that's like very natural. So that's kind of the difference between like getting around band 7 and then moving up to band 8 when it starts to sound really natural. 2 is another good one. 2 always becomes tough. I went to Starbucks this morning. I went to Starbucks this morning. I went to Starbucks this morning. So if you can start to put in those like weak sounds to start, you know, I'd like to, I like to, I like to. So it comes like that. I like to, I like to. And serene to meet people there. Can becomes can. I can. Depends on. These come together and it becomes like a zon sound. It depends on. Depends on. Depends on the interests of. The interests of different people. Interests of. The interests of different people. And that's how it starts to sound like much more natural. And then the words that get really stressed are mostly the nouns and also the verbs a little bit, but it's mostly the nouns or like important adjectives like tranquil, serene, people, different opinions. So like the nouns are really important. Sometimes adjectives and verbs, but mostly
Okay.
nouns. And that's like the difference between like 7 and 8 and getting up to like band 9. With vocabulary, it's basically about in grammar, it's basically about range and accuracy. So the range means, are you using different words, not always using the same ones? Are you able to use like lots and lots of different phrasal verbs, lots of natural expressions, collocations, and can you use them correctly? And there might be some balance between those two. Like you try to use lots of them, but some of them are incorrect. Same thing with grammar. Can you use lots of different types of grammar and can you use it correctly? So those two. And then for fluency, it's about like how fast do you talk? How much do you say on? Do you repeat yourself? Are your answers clear? But generally, like if you're getting all sevens here, they'll probably just give you a 7 here too. If you're getting all 8s here, you probably get an 8 here. That's not really like a huge, like there's not that many things to notice in terms of fluency.
Okay. So as for me, I think the problems due with the grammar.
Yeah, I'd say the grammar is like the grammar is the one that sticks out the most, more than the other ones, because everything else is kind of like really strong and good. And there's just like a few times when there's a few too many little grammar mistakes. Sometimes pronunciation as well. There's like a few words that are a little bit tricky. But let's take a look specifically. So yeah, it's a pretty swell, but yeah, I don't know if we call it disturbance. Yeah, pretty well. You can say like accepts or construction. Below. You can say like the construction. This is like kind of like a UK expression, but people say the construction doing my head in. That means like kind of making me go crazy a little bit. The home underneath my home is usually we say renovating, not refurbishing. Renovating or like doing construction. Or you can be really specific, like getting repainted or they're like putting in new furniture or something, whatever they're doing. So I went out to Starbucks. Yep. Went out to is a good phrasal verb. You can also say like I headed off or out or over. Starbucks. Get some peace and quiet. And just like the head off, head out, head over to instead of go is a really good one. And yeah. I took it Saturday. Yeah, speaking is today. I'm a student currently. I'm in grade 12. I'm ready to apply for. Yep. This is a good opportunity. Like I'm a grade 12, a senior. It's good vocab. You can say I'm a senior in grade 12. I'm ready to apply for university. Yep. I got this next year. Or you can use a good phrasal verb like I'm just getting in all my university applications now. Or I'm just about to send out my universities. Try to get into those phrasal verbs, send out, getting in. I'd like to manage. What was the other subject? Math and
Physics.
yes, I'd like to major in math, physics probably. I think that was just the internet, not your pronunciation, but be careful. Yeah, physics. And what did you say? I'm a big fan of.
And just these areas. There are some specific ones like algebra.
Yep. Maybe instead of a big fan of, you can say like, like I've got a knack for, or like these things like algebra and logical thinking, maybe. Logical thinking or spatial reasoning come easy to me. Or I've got a knack for the sciences, for math and science and algebra and so on. Or this comes easy to me. Well, personally, I'd like to meet up. Yeah, meets. You can use meet up is a good phrasal verb. Meet up at cafes, mostly these days. These days you can use these days for now, and then when you want to talk about the past, you can say like back then. Back then, those are kind of just easy ways. Sometimes that can help you, so you don't have to. Because I think maybe you hesitate and you say some uhs and ums because you're trying to put in that time. You can just say like these days. Personally, I like to meet out at cafes, blah blah blah. Or if it's the past, you can say back then. Well, personally, I like to, and then that takes care of like the time period for you. It's tranquil and serene. Those are okay. Um, you could just say like they're tranquil and serene. But they're okay. I think maybe you can say like maybe just like they're especially you can say especially This is where you could be more specific, right? Especially this one out of the way cafe in my house. It's quiet in the afternoons, and cozy, you know, chill out for a few hours. You can be more specific, or you could talk about, like, my local Starbucks is comfortable. Yeah, and it's kind of like what you're getting at Starbucks. It's like good customer service, professional environment, safe, etc. Yep, press fine, maybe that one. But yeah, if you can give like that specific example of a place where you go, or you can really talk about, my local Starbucks and talk about like why you like it. Just be a little bit more specific. I think the answers will be a little bit better with vocab. I think
Okay.
it depends on the interests of each person. For me, yeah, so it depends. Yeah, you can just say it depends. And then for me, or you can say like it comes down to, like a range of factors. For me, always use the contraction. It's basically just the most tranquil place is the best. Yeah, that's good grammar. But for others, maybe but others may value, and then you can be specific about it, like convenience, design, the quality of the coffee, other foods there, how cheap it is, lots of different possible areas. Yep. Yeah, care about the I
So
guess
when I was thinking, how can I just fill in these time zone?
how can you what?
How can I fill this time if I don't say to fill the time?
Some students say, like there's a trick you can do. Some students say that you can say in your head, but don't say it aloud. So you can try
Okay.
practicing that, see if that works for you. Some students have told me that works. Like instead of when they're gonna say they just say it in their head. They pause for a second, they say it in their head, and then they don't say it aloud. But you're still pausing when you do that. But I think your level of speed is good. So you speak like fast. So I think it's not really a big issue. And actually, you don't say on too much, so it's not a big problem. If you can
Okay.
reduce it a
Okay.
little bit more, it's okay. But I
Okay.
wouldn't say it's a big deal. You can try that tip, but you might not want to do that if you're taking the test this afternoon, because it might take you some time to get the hang of it. I
Okay.
guess.
I
Yeah.
had another question.
Yep.
Um, whether the connection area may just let the examiner can't hear clearly what the words I'm saying. Is that will affect the score?
You mean, are you taking the test online or in person?
Yeah, it is online.
So you mean like the internet connection?
Yeah, internet connection.
I think it should be okay, because are you taking it at like the test center or something like that? Or you're taking it at home?
Yeah,
Or
yeah, in the test center. Yeah, it's in the test center.
yeah, so I think the internet should be fine there. I think they'll make sure that's okay and everything. I don't know. I mean, it probably does have a little bit of a factor just because talking online is a little bit harder than talking in person, even if the connection's
Yeah,
kind of
sure.
perfect. Yeah. So I think it can, but maybe they know that, so then they like account for that. Like they know that the pronunciation online is a little bit lower, so maybe they consider that factor. It probably shouldn't make a difference, but it could. It's possible, yeah.
So should I just say it more like slowly or just clear?
I think being a little bit clearer is good. Yeah, there were a few times with
Okay.
some words that were a little bit unclear. So yeah, just really making sure that you stress the nouns, especially. Those are the words that you really need in order to
Okay.
be able to understand a sentence, is the nouns, maybe the verbs too, but mostly like the nouns are the key ones.
Got this.
Yeah. Yeah, you can say like nowadays, like cafes for sure. You don't always have to use full sentences. You can just use like phrases, right? Like nowadays, cafes for sure. Like back when I was a kid, back when I was a child. Yeah, kid or back when I was a child or back then. What were the places you said? I couldn't understand the word. Is
School.
Oh, back then, yeah, school. Um, in school, we get in touch with each other. Yeah, my buddies and me, my friends and me. Yeah, you could probably explain a little bit more because maybe like in China, lots of kids, go home late. Maybe like finish school around 4 p.m. or so, around 4 p.m. or later, and might have extra classes too. So there's not much time to go over to someone's house to hang out. You have to have, you might have a snack after school, and you have dinner later, and you have homework. So kids tend to hang out at school mostly. They don't hang out at other people's houses. In other countries, sometimes people get out of school earlier, like around 2 p.m., and then you have more time. But I think that meeting places, yeah, so there's some like a few too many ums here. Again, maybe if you can try to get to the specific example a little bit better, like some places you can just say like personally, don't worry, these are personal questions. You can just say personally, for me, it's all about noise levels. And then you might give an example, like the Starbucks around the corner from my house is quiet in the mornings when people are headed off to work. But then in the late afternoons and evenings, it gets noisy because students and workers who just got off and over there. So I prioritize quiet spot. I think that kind of is suitable, yeah. And then you might just mention quickly, like other people, they might not care so much about that. If they're meeting friends, if they're meeting family, if it's a business meeting, you might choose a different location for all of those. You might list a few different things. It could be like, meeting friends, meeting family, meeting like a business meeting, meeting up to discuss like a school project or presentation, school presentation. Maybe you want a quieter place. It might depend on like the reason for the meeting. Some places might be more or less suitable. But yeah, I think if you can get to those examples maybe a little bit earlier, and it should be just examples from your life because it's part one. So it should be easy for you to give those examples. And then you can be, it might help you to reduce the ums, and it might also help you to use better vocab. Probably, you can say neither. And instead of probably, you can say, well, actually, neither. If you really want me to, yeah, if you really want me to choose, or if you really wanted, yeah. Or sometimes you say, like, if I had to choose. It's a little bit informal, but sometimes we say, like, gun to my head. I think it's okay, though. Like, gun to my head, I'd go with, probably the latter one. Care about the pronunciation? The stress is on the first part, la. So it's like la, the latter. Probably the latter. It's one of my interests. Yeah, it doesn't raise my interest with what you were saying, right? Yeah, so like a lot of times like online advertisements are like targeted at a specific audience segment. So they might know that you like, for example, you might be Googling a certain type of shoe, like some Nikes, and then you get an ad from Nike about sneakers. So they kind of like targeted you, which is like a little bit creepy, but also useful. right? Because it can be what you're actually interested in. These kinds of video ads, yeah, on YouTube. Usually you can skip ad. Any of this really specific vocab is really good. Skip ad. Yeah, television ones, we call these commercials. So commercials are much more annoying because you can't skip them. Can't skip them or look away. Sometimes if you're on the internet, you can just like open up a different tab or mute your computer for a second. I think those kinds of ads that you can say aren't beneficial. We don't say unbeneficial. You can say aren't beneficial for mental development. Raise my interest. We don't really say raise my interest where, yeah, if they, you can say if they don't get me interested in buying product, or you can just say if I have no interest in, I have no interest in buying it. Means, again, this is where you can give an example, right? So like, for instance, maybe you just got a new phone. So anytime I see a smartphone ad, I just tune it out. Or it might be something that's like totally irrelevant to you. Like you see lots of car ads, or I don't know what else it would be. Yeah, but there's different ads maybe that are completely irrelevant to you. For like staying in, going to resorts or something like that, going to resorts or cruises. Like some of these ads, like you can say it's like not on my radar. I'm not thinking about doing any of those things. I'm not thinking about buying a car. So those ads are completely irrelevant. Not some circumstances. Yeah, you can say in some circumstances. Yes. You can say in some rare circumstances. The ad is interesting for me, or maybe relevant is a good one you can say there. It's relevant to me, or raise, or you can just say interest me, or kind of maybe like convinces me to buy it, or persuades me. Maybe not I'll surely, but I might share it with other people. Too big or unreal. Yeah, that's okay. But again, like a specific example is always best. Like if I find a good deal on some shoes, then I might forward the ad to some of my friends on WeChat, like really specific like that, or if I find some food or something like that, a deal at a restaurant, I might forward it to them. For me personally, not really. Sometimes I'm more into math and sciences. We don't say math field, but you can say the field of math and science, or you can say like mathematical fields. Advertising, yeah, I'm not that into it at all. Many people around me work in the advertising, maybe you can say industry, developing software. And sometimes we call these like algorithms, things that tech companies use to target people. And you can be specific, like in my family or my friends or people I know at university. Yeah, and the stories they tell me, unreal. Yeah. There's a lot of like really unethical practices. Advertising can be really like invasive. Like you can try to like find out things about your life, and then it can target certain audience segments and kind of like unethically, like try to really like pinpoint vulnerable segments of society. And again, it's good if you can give an example. For instance, if they figure out that a person is like depressed or something based on what they search for online, then they might like advertise fast food to like depress people. And then it'll like, because maybe they're more vulnerable to making purchases like that, but then that's just going to make them more depressed. So it can be like very unethical, even though it increases their sales numbers. And a lot of times it's not even people that do it because they design an algorithm. And then the algorithm knows to do this, knows to like target those people. And the computer obviously doesn't have like a conscience. So it doesn't know that this is not right to do because it's not controlled by a person. But then the people who make those algorithms, they know this is going to happen. I don't want to deceive other people. Yeah, there's a lot of like, deceptive tactics in the advertising field and marketing, that field. Item I want to tell you about. I want to tell you about is what was it? A dancing like outfit kind of.
Dress. Yeah,
I don't know if we
outfit.
call it a dress. Is it like it's like an outfit? Is it like a leotard or something like that? It's like something you'd wear for kind of like for ballet or something, or a different type.
No, it is used for the competition in Latin dance.
Oh, okay, so it is like a dress. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a
Yeah, so you can make that clear from the beginning. That's also a great vocab, like a dress, like a traditional Latin dress from a Latin dancing class. And then that makes it very clear from the beginning. She was, I think, yeah, you can use past simple here. She was my best friend back then. Yeah, some of those really words like Latin dance class. Put a lot of stress on Latin dance class to perform better our dancing moves. Yeah, just to perform better, or you can say to move better. About life and dancing in common. Yeah, that's really good. Good vocab. Like we saw eye to eye. A lot of things. Or we were always on the same page. Good expressions. But careful with past simple. She got to know me so well, and we lived together for about 10 days at that time. She had to leave the school, quit the school, or stop attending classes. She had no choice. She was very disappointed. For the pronunciation on choices, she gave me her dancing dresses. She left. You can also say she left me all her. She was going to leave the. We wouldn't really say the dancing place, but you can say the studio, the dance studio, or just like the dance class. She had no reason. Yeah, no one but me to give it to. Maybe no one but me to give it to. They were very meaningful for her. It was, again, careful with past simple was really beneficial. You can just say she wore these dresses. Been a lot of competitions. I'm still very thankful and appreciate this chance. Yeah, that's all fine. Careful as well the pronunciation of clothes. Yeah, it comes up a little bit later. Well, I think not really. In most cases, you can just say in most cases, people think it's yeah, you were saying some other things, right? Like they're more likely to give people are more likely. Yeah, they can give some examples. Memorable, but not clothes. It's just clothes, not clothes as clothes. Clothes. So it's like this. Clothes. Just clothes. Or you can say clothing. They don't know each other. Yeah, if they don't know each other well enough to know their size. Yep. Or style. For people who have really, use present perfect here, have really gotten to know each other well. I think clothes are good choices. Yep. They know their taste in clothes. It will give the receivers a surprise. Exactly. Yeah, exactly. If they know, again, if you use an example here, it's probably better if they know what your style is. For instance, you like certain colors, certain maybe like earthy colors, and you prefer to wear, like t-shirts and sweatshirts and trousers rather than like really curly dresses, then they can pick out clothes that suit you, fit with your look, and it shows how much they care. So again, like the really specific stuff. Earthy colors are like darker colors, like browns and greens. Why this is the case, schools and our formal occasions. In order to fit into these environments, yeah, I think you say these environments. It kind of, but you can say like it sets the tone. Again, it gets a little bit general. If you gave another example, you can give a personal example, or you could say like, a student in China, all students in China have to wear uniforms, right? So like all students in China must wear uniforms. And this helps it so like we can't tell the difference between which students are rich, which students are poor. And then when you get in the classroom, it's kind of like everyone is equal and you feel like you're in a professional environment. And you have to like the person who's most important is the teacher who can wear whatever they want. It kind of like sets the tone for the whole classroom. Let's take into consideration. Yeah. Yeah, you can say these companies nowadays or these days take into consideration how people feel at work more than companies in the past. People dress maybe not cozier, more comfortably, more informally, but that doesn't mean they can dress like you still can't dress like sloppily. You can't like look bad. You might be able to work like jeans and t-shirts to work, but like a nice one. Yeah. So you still have to look kind of like sometimes we call it like business casual. So it's like a little bit on the casual side, like not a full suit and tie, but it's still not like you can't wear pajamas to work in most companies. Although some like tech companies maybe. That's the case. I think in ancient times there was greater separation between different cultures. Yeah, the Muslims. What was the group? Also the say like the Jews or
Yeah, I want to say Jews, but I
yep, Jews is
just don't know
fine.
how to pronounce it exactly.
You can like even like the ancient Chinese and Japanese, right? Like back in the past where they wore more traditional clothing than they do now. Like all groups around the world, right? To have interactions with different cultures today. Especially they can see it a lot of it like through entertainment. And then there's also like big conglomerates that make clothes all over the world and they send it around. Companies like fashion companies and companies like Nike, people tend to wear clothes from different cultures just for fun. Yep. I'll talk about like globalization. It's kind of that idea. We can tell the difference. Um, yeah, so this was great when you gave the examples, right? Like we can tell where someone is from by their clothes. And then, yeah, this is probably your best answer because they're really specific. Yeah, like in Yunnan province, in northern places like Mongolia, yeah, can tell from their clothes. Although the clothes still represents culture. Yeah, so this was really good, the example. When I went to Inner Mongolia, and then you use really good vocab like Inner Mongolia, represent Inner Mongolian culture. Life. Yes, if you could describe them a little bit. So they've got, I don't know exactly how they look, but they've got like traditional headdresses, and then they've got kind of like heavy clothes that they wear, made from, I'm not sure what's made from, like hemp or from cotton, with like they have sort of like traditional ornaments and like jewelry that they might wear. Uh, I saw, I saw with my own eyes. A lot of the clothes are made of cotton, yeah, but without all the decorations. And there might also be some kind of like blending of traditional and modern. So they might wear some like traditional Mongolian clothes, but then they might have like a pair of sneakers on. And that's because like they're more comfortable for walking around, compared to their traditional shoes, which maybe they look good, but they're not as comfortable, they're not as cheap. So they kind of like blend them together. And they might have like a Western t-shirt on sometimes. It's really important for companies to do that. Yep. The earth, and it's everyone's responsibility. Don't act together to do something. Or sometimes we say like act in concert. That means act together. Earth will be damaged by, you can say, human activity. It can be specific, pollution, and like practices like driving cars, um, using single-use plastics, flying abroad, flying to other countries, things like that. Limit the waste we produce. It's really eye-catching to use that as comments. Yeah, it's a lot of marketing. They'll use it kind of like as a marketing ploy, like a scheme that they use, right? So they use it kind of as like a tagline, eco-friendly products, and they can use it to sell their products. I think there are various ways to do it. They can raise their voice on the internet, or make their opinions known online. So again, you can be more specific. Yeah, post on the internet or on Facebook or on you can mention the Chinese websites too. The number of, and then like people all around the world can come together in a way that was impossible in the past. I think another thing, you can just say, I think also they can write letters to the governments. Also, a lot of times people will say that like consumers vote with their wallets. So like the products you choose to buy are the best way to tell companies what you want. So if you buy eco-friendly products, then companies will produce more of them. And if you don't buy ones that are not eco-friendly, then companies will produce less of them. So that's like the best way to influence them. But it takes people kind of like working together in the aggregate, like everyone deciding to do it together, or most people. But not taking if it's, yeah, if it is too costly, governments, yeah, the government maybe like acts when they have to, when public opinion is really strong in one direction, then they will listen to it. But if it doesn't feel like everyone wants it, then maybe they will just ignore it and do whatever the businesses want. So yeah, like individuals have to force companies and governments to take action, because on their own they probably won't take action. They'll just be worried about like their bottom line, how much money they make. Yeah, so I think the main things for you today, just like you did, but try to fix a little bit with that grammar, and also try to give more specific examples and answers in all parts of the test. Part 1, part 2, part 3. I mean, part 2 is fine, but part 1 and part 3. If you can do that, you don't have to do it all the time. If you do it all the time, it might make you go, numb too much. But like whenever you feel like you have a good opportunity, try to do that.
Sure.
Any questions about any of that?
No, really. Thank you.